All right, folks. So it is, well, now it's 7:01. Great. So thank you so much for joining Sheba Talks. It is such a great morning. Such a beautiful morning. And so what seems to be happening is that it seems like Sheba Talks is actually happening every other Tuesday. And that's okay. I'm just kind of flowing, not really forcing anything, just doing what feels natural or organic. So it's good. But yeah, so today, the topic is to be or not to be. And this is a popular question or phrase that really was derived, I think, in some type of theater, and so it just hit me yesterday, to be or not to be. And so when I began to actually look at what this means, it's a reflection of a few things, right? So the first thing is that it denotes something which is to come. The unique thing about to be is that it's an irregular verb, right? So it's like, oh my gosh, it's so compact, right? Because it takes on the past, the present, and the future. In other cases, it has mixed tenses, which means that it can be past, present, future, all kind of mixed, whether it be in one or whether it be two out of three or so forth and so on. So an example of that, obviously, is I chose to be, which represents the past, and I choose to be, which represents either the present or the future. And so you're probably wondering, okay, like what is your point, right? My point is, or rather my question is, what are you choosing to allow in your life? This was something that I have been thinking about since Sunday, because I had like a serious reality check from God, and we might touch base on it a little bit later in the talk. But for now, let me just kind of get to what I need to say as of right now, right? So the point of me saying all of that, to be, which is to come, right? It's a regular verb. It takes on past, present, and future. Is what are you choosing to allow? Now, evidently, obviously, right? We can if we want to, but we really shouldn't focus on the past. The only time that we can focus on the past is if it's used as an aid for growth, whether it be for ourselves or whether it be for others, right? I sometimes reflect on the past a lot, actually, to measure growth, right? There's some things that I made a decision that I would never repeat again, and I want to make sure that will always remain my current reality. Or I reflect to the past to kind of be a teaching guide for others. So I want to really, really focus on the present and the future, right? What current choices are you making that's pushing you closer to where you want to be? Now, this is where the conversation and the dialogue between myself and the Lord, God, has occurred, right? Because he started to talk to me about capabilities. And so I'm now that I've grasped it first, now I'm able to. Now it gives me a right to share it with others because I got it first, right? So the question is, what are you capable of doing? What are you capable of accomplishing? Remember, we're talking about present. I choose to be present. I choose to be future, right? How are the decisions or choices you're making pushing you closer to your capabilities, or are they drawing you further and further away? So I had like I said, going back, I had a self-check, And so I want to kind of give you a synopsis of what this check looked like in a very practical form, right? So if you think about this is hilarious, but if you think about, a lot of times we spend a lot of time, even though this situation wasn't really, this particular example wasn't referring to myself, it was something else, but this is something I kind of grasped that could really be similar as it relates to principle. So if you think about the time, right, that we spend on social media, all the time that we spend just being social, period. What I've learned over the years is that there's a time to work and there's a time to play. The problem is that people, right, we sometimes get consumed with celebrating with no accomplishment, right? So let me say that again, because if, people that are joining in, I'm using a very practical example to really drive the point of to be or not to be, which represents your choices of what you allow presently and what you allow in the future. As I mentioned before, we're not really going to talk about the past because the past is the past. And so, as I said before, we're looking at what are you capable of doing? What are you capable of accomplishing? What current choices are you making that's pushing you closer to where you want to be? Or how are the decisions and choices you're making pushing you closer to your capabilities? Like, really, do you really know what you're capable of doing? It's one thing to say it. One thing I learned about just people is that, oh, my goodness, they'll say anything. I mean, it's like, wow. And the actions are so far disconnected from what they say, it's alarming, right? And so as I said before, how do we use this in a very practical form? Remembering your capabilities. What are you capable of doing, right? And so as I was saying before, we sometimes I even have to catch myself because I will be indulged in social media, right? Or just being social. And as I said before, over the course of years, I learned that there's a time to work and there's a time to play. I remember a few years ago, I was really zoned in this work, right, this work bucket. I was so zoned in and so focused because I was so sick and tired of not accomplishing anything or something that's substantial, right? And so I'm like, listen, I have to withdraw. Like, going to every event, I can't do that. Being at every, gathering, I can't do that. Being at I just couldn't do it. And it actually led to a few people being quite upset with me, which is fine because I think that I'm able to handle those types of situations very well. I don't really get moved when people are, upset or offended because it is what it is, right? But all jokes aside, I mean, thank goodness they were open. They were like, we just really expected you. And I had to explain to them where I was in that moment as it relates to my life, just my personal life in general, and then what I needed to accomplish. I'm like, listen, not to be funny, and it's not that I'm discouraging anyone from celebrating or enjoying life by any means, but there has to come a point in time where you have to withdraw. And the things that you've written down, the vision board that you posted up, the goals that you have to begin to start working towards them, right? So I was sharing an example with one of my friends yesterday, my sister friend yesterday, and I was telling her, this is just, we have these deep conversations all the time. And I was telling her, again, we're talking about a few practical examples, right? I said, I had to reflect and I had to think about, the amount of money that we spend, right, on like Uber, Lyft, and whatever other taxi and things, services, and so forth and so on. As I said before, this really is an outcome of a conversation that I had, I think that God more so had with me about my capability and those who are within my circle and their capability as well, right? So anyway, so the question was, what large companies, or even if it's not a large company, who are we patronizing for things we could be doing ourselves? Now, she took it in a certain context, right? So she was thinking about, multiple streams of income, so forth and so on. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm not going to be nobody's Uber or Lyft driver, right? Which is fine. If that was, that's a wonderful choice, but just not my choice, right? But what I'm thinking about is I really sat and I thought, and I'm like, geez, Sheba, all of this money that's being spent, and you can fill in the gap. You can fill in the gap for whatever this practical example is in your personal life, right? So I was thinking, I'm like, all of this, and even though it may have diminished, right, because of COVID, so I'm working from home, we're not really doing anything, but the principle still remains the same, right? So think about all the money you could have saved, and you could actually have your own car by now, right? And as I said before, you can fill in the gap for whatever. Like I said, I'm just using very practical examples based upon a few conversations. And I'm like, you know what? Oh, my goodness, this is so right. Or when you spent money on this, and you could have by now, with all of your saving, if you would have just really disciplined yourself and settled yourself, you could have had a house by now. You probably could have had 2 houses by now, or 2 cars by now, or 3 businesses by now, or, so forth and so on. I don't really know your personal situation, but these are just 2 very practical examples that you can really pull the principle of what I'm trying to say, right? As it goes back to, what are you capable of doing? What are you capable of accomplishing? How are your everyday decisions? Sometimes we always think of the big, massive, astronomical. No. I'm talking about everyday things that you choose to do, that you choose to do. You don't really have to do it, but you choose to do it, right? How is it pushing you closer, to your capabilities, or how is it pushing you further away? I know some of these things sound like a reoccurring thing, but I think it's intentional. Because, as I said before, we have people who are saying a lot, right? But they're accomplishing so little. And what's even worse is that they're celebrating with no accomplishment. So what they do, and I've done this before, so let me tell you something. Been there, done that. So what they do is that they make up stuff to celebrate so that they can feel good about themselves. So they can feel as if they're accomplishing something. But when you really get to the nitty-gritty, you're like, sweetie, you're not doing anything. You know they say, like, have a seat? It's almost like, have a seat. You're not doing anything. Stop it. Who are you fooling? You're only fooling maybe yourself, I guess, or maybe those who are not bold or daring enough to hold you accountable to your greatness, right? And I was talking to, this is going to go over because I just feel like just chatting. So if you can stay, lovely. If you have to go, so be it. Listen to the recording, right? So I was talking to a mentee of mine who I was doing some career coaching and guidance and college selection and so forth and so on. And I told her, let me tell you something. In order for you to grow, you have to surround yourself with people that's going to hold you accountable to your greatness. Anything that's less than that, you are doing yourself a disservice. Sometimes people surround themselves with people that make them feel good, and, they pacify their emotions, and, because they don't want to offend, they don't want to hurt, and they don't want to listen. I want to really, really empower you to surround yourself with more people that hold you to your greatness, that hold you accountable to the things that you're able to accomplish, to your capabilities, right? This is what I really want you to empower you to do, because nothing should make you feel greater than growth. Really, I mean, think about it. What else is better than that, growing? And so I remember saying this on a Sheba Talks about 2 years ago. Wow, Sheba Talks have been going so I'll get it. Anyway, but I remember saying this on a Sheba Talks about 2 years ago. And what I said was that, this came back to me as I was preparing this talk, but what I said was that when you're born, you're closer to death than you are to life, as far as a natural thing, right? You're closer to dying, sweetie. The moment you're born, you're closer to dying than you are to living. You're not going to go back in your mommy's womb, and she ain't going to push you out again. No, sweetie, you're closer to the grave, right? So yes, as I mentioned before, I do not discourage anyone from living their life. Live it to the fullest, because, I mean, even for the last, year and more, we realize the importance of living, right, your best life and making. I mean, the the most of your life, and I mean, living your life like it's the last. A lot of people say that. I've said it, right? So I'm speaking to myself first. I've said it, but when you look at their lives, it's so disconnected from that. So we've heard this new and ongoing mantra that encourages people to, girl, live your best life. I mean, you got the people taking shots and they drink and they dancing and they're carrying on, and which is fine, right? So we have this mantra that, live your best life, girl. Don't care about what nobody says and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And if you notice that a lot of that is related to like this social, aspect of living. But I want to introduce or reintroduce what I would consider to be the definition of living your best life. So one, right, who truly lives and has lived, which may be people who have passed on, right? So one who truly lives, meaning remember, to be is present and future, who lives currently and has lived, right, their best life, is one who has put things in place and in order for others. This is what I'm talking about as far as generational wealth. You're setting the path, right? You're blazing the trail for the next generation to build on. That's really the definition of living your best, meaning checking off every single thing that you're capable of doing. Not only the astronomical, the big, the huge things, but even the small things. Not passing on problems and debt and issues, right? We're talking about legacy here. Legacy is one who focuses, hang on. Okay, sorry. So yeah, a person who lives their best life, rather, is one who focuses on legacy. This is a person who is living their best life or who has lived their best life. So when you hear people say that, I really don't want you to get caught up in the folly. I don't want you to get so caught up in your social life that your personal life is struggling, your financial life is struggling, your emotional life is struggling, your spiritual life is struggling, and your physical life is, honey, that's not living your best life. I don't know what life that is, but it's not the best that you're able to do. So, as I mentioned before, what current choices are you making that's pushing you closer to where you want to be right at this very moment, but then also where you want to be in the future? And not only that, as we mentioned before, what current choices are you making presently that's going to allow others to build on this foundation that you've made? So let's go back to the question, right? And the question was, to be or not to be? Will it be you or will it not be you? So I'm done. And as I said before, if you missed some of it, then you're always able to go back because I record this. But if you got it, if you were here rather, I'm really hoping that you're able to apply this, like for real, for real. Look at where you're spending your time. Look at where you're spending your money. Look at where you're quote unquote spending your resources and where you're giving your talents to. Is it pushing you closer to your capabilities, or is it distracting you away from what you are capable of doing? Because this is really what we've been placed here to do, not to really, to socialize is fine, but if it becomes a distraction, then that's exactly what it is, a distraction. So I just want to thank you so much for spending an additional 5 minutes. I didn't go too off, but an additional 5 minutes with me as I shared with you what is on my mind. I am brainstorming and thinking about 2 upcoming events before the end of the year. So just plug into my social media platforms, which is on Facebook, Sheba Empowers, and then Instagram is Sheba with a double A, Empowers. If you haven't checked out the website yet, you're more than welcome to do that. It's ShebaEmpowers.com. And there's a few things that, like I said, I'm working. When I say I mean the team is working to bring to you. I have introduced, I think like 2 weeks ago or so, the Ready, Set, Go 30-minute consultation call for those who do have ideas or, goals and just things that's on their heart and their mind and their spirit that they want to implement, and they may need someone, right, to probe their thinking. They may need someone to spark the fire. And I want to introduce you to Sheba. That's me. I'm very capable and good at doing this. So if you haven't done so, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and we can set that up for you and, get you on your way. This is what I'm here to do. I'm here to serve and to give and even to reach all of my capabilities. So, again, thank you so much for listening to Sheba Talks. As I mentioned before, it seems like we're having this pattern of every other week. So we'll see how things go. But I want it to flow. I don't want to feel like I'm being forced. I want it to be organic because I want it to be I want it to be powerful, empowering, and impactful. So have a great day. As I always say, I love you. Peace.